Welcome, Built Right listeners. Today, we're joined by Matt Pierce, founder and CEO of Immediate, who delivers responsible on-demand pay through early wage access. Really interesting product and solution we'll get into here in a bit. But Matt has 2 decades of experience in high-growth businesses, including early-stage startups, all the way through IPO. But welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited about the conversation.
Yeah, and today we're going to be getting into Matt's story of finding product market fit by focusing on a very specific niche. And this is a lesson anyone really can apply to your business, no matter the size or scale. It's one of those like lifelong first principle lessons you really got to lean into. And his story is one of the better ones I've heard of how they focused and then used that to scale. And plus, as always, we're going to get into how AI is impacting Matt's business, how they're taking advantage of it, and where he sees the future going. But before we jump in, give us a bit of a background on you, Matt, your experience and kind of what's led you to where you are today. And then we'll get into the fun part of the story of how you got started with Immediate.
It is funny when you hear almost 20 years. I go, wait, has it been almost 20 years? Goodness gracious, time flies.
It
It's
creeps up, isn't it?
it really does. So I tell people a lot. I've been in sales all my life and started as an intern in grad school working for a healthcare technology company. I was able to take that and enroll it into a full-time job out of school, and ended up being at this company for right at a decade, and was fortunate enough to was employee 55, was fortunate enough to get in kind of
Nice.
on the I got a nice seat on a rocket ship. We built it up and took it public, and I worked my way up in the partnerships world. So when I first came in, I was building a reseller program. I took it from 4 to 25 partners, and then they let me hire somebody to manage it. And then I moved on to build a national lead gen program, which I built up from essentially nothing. I added 44 partners in the first year. We did 5 million in revenue in the first year there. And then they let me hire somebody to manage that. And kept just working my way out of jobs, right? I'd build something up and
Mm-hmm.
then I'd go, all right, I need somebody to manage essentially I need somebody to farm what I've gone out and gotten ready for us. And I ended up, I guess they at a certain point said, well, he's done every job in this division. Let's just make him the head of it. And so I got a promotion to run in the business development team. And it was about the time that we were going public. And so we had a nice IPO in early 2012, and then Vista Equity Partners came along and acquired the business for about $650 million a year and a half later. And I got to hang around for about a year after that and really learned a lot about private equity backed companies. And it was interesting. I'll share a little bit about this because it really helped frame and shape a lot of who I am and the way that we've been building this business here
Yeah.
is when I started there, very little process, right? Super heavy on the
Mm.
culture. Still some of my best friends are from there. I actually met my wife at this company. It was just like a really good culture of people who were waking up every day, rowing in the same direction. And you build and build. I think we were 850 employees when we sold, and learned a ton along the way. But what happens when private equity comes in, and especially for us, they took us back private and then merged us with two of our competitors. And
Oh,
so
wow.
you blink and wake up and it's, oh, hey, we're 1,800 employees and we're in five different cities, and trying to build relationships with a finance team and a legal team and a field sales team, and take all that and then bundle it into a private equity playbook where there's very detailed structure. And so that culture shifted very quickly to process. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I always took that as a really solid lesson for blending culture and process, right? You don't want to be overly processed because then you lose your culture. You don't want to be overly focused on culture because then you kind of lose the process. And I
Yeah.
think as a company and organization grows, that's really the thing that you have to go through that's going to help you get to that next level is how do I keep culture intact? How do we make sure that things are still fun and exciting?
Mm-hmm.
But as we grow and scale and you go from like here at Immediate, go from me being the only salesperson to now we have 8, how do we make sure that they're all falling in line and working the right process? And so that's something that I
Yeah.
learned early on that I think has carried me through my career.
Yeah, and you hit on an interesting point. I've been through some of this too. But the first thing for listeners, like step back, and if you're early in your career, I think it's Marissa Meyer. It doesn't matter what seat you get on the rocket ship, just go get a seat. That's a
Right.
great way to accelerate your career. Great to have experience in both small and big companies, but like what Matt just went through, like you basically probably accelerated 20 years worth of a career probably in a 5 year period.
100%. Absolutely.
But the one piece you hit on process and culture, that was really interesting there. We've had similar things with Hatchworks. When you're a startup and you're small and everybody knows everybody, it's easy. You don't need all the process, but you start to hit these plateaus. As you were talking through that, I'm like, man, we've gone through these same things of getting to, I've heard of it in people numbers or revenue numbers. It's like you hit the million in revenue, hits a plateau,
Mm-hmm.
hit about 10 million, 100 million. And there's these different pain points as you go and grow. But it's interesting to hear that story as you go there. And the process piece, that'll be interesting. We'll get your take on that later as we start to get into AI and where does that fit in with automating some of these pieces, and maybe it accelerates things even
100%.
further.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I don't want to skip ahead, but there's definitely some things that AI is bringing to the table that is helping organizations as they scale and going through those
Mm-hmm.
processes. But just to round that out, after I left there, I spent a few years. I spent 2 years at a company up in Boston, and then a year out, a company out in LA. And really, I think that there's, I guess, like this, the mindset that comes from an entrepreneur is
Mm-hmm.
I knew in college that this is what I wanted to do. I obviously had
Yeah.
no clue what kind of company I was going to start. I felt like I was a natural born leader, and I felt like in some cases, I thought I might be unemployable. I've got opinions, and so there's this piece.
It's a
Like I
great
was,
track for
I just remember
entrepreneurship.
exactly. I just remember
Yeah.
sitting in a class in college and being like, "Ew, I just don't know if I want to work for somebody." And we all work for somebody, but it's
Yeah.
also I knew that's where I wanted to get, and so I was like, "What are the steps in the process that I could take?" And
Mm-hmm.
so when I had that opportunity to join that company right out of college, or when I was still in grad school and then joined right out of college, I was like, "This is a time for me to go in and lean in and learn." And so I was very deliberate about the selection that I made. I could have gone to work. Matter of fact, I had a job offer right out of grad school to move to LA and get into the entertainment industry, like from an agent
Mm.
perspective, like be an agent
Yeah.
in training. Which I think now about, goodness gracious, how different would my life be?
Yeah.
I went out there and did like a 2 week interview process and got the job offer, and it was going to be like an agent in training for celebrity voiceover work. We're talking like 03, 04, when that was
Yeah.
like just getting going. Like now you hear celebrities on all the advertisements. Back then that was kind
Yeah.
of unheard of. And so it was just different path. But I remember when I was going through the checklist, the pros and cons on that decision of, is this going to help me get closer to starting a company and being my own
Mm-hmm.
boss, or is this going to take me way out of my comfort zone and put me into a place where, what if I really love this and I'm here the rest of my life? I'm like a West Coaster the rest of my life, and I just didn't know if that's what I wanted. And obviously, for me at least, I made the right decision. And so I kind of was seeking that when I left. I went and worked for this company in Boston, learned a good bit there, got to really rebuild a growth organization, which is an
Yeah.
important piece of the puzzle. And then I got picked up by a pre-Series A company out on the West Coast. And in my mind, it was, all right, I'm going to go do this again. This is a pre-Series
Mm-hmm.
A. I was employed like 25, good equity slug. And let me go build this thing. And this is going to be a big West Coast pop. And I just got burned out. I was traveling
Yeah.
out there every 3 weeks. I was traveling all over the country. I was like a team of one, and I just got burned out. And about a year into it, we parted ways, and I sat down and go, all right, like now's the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
started doing growth consulting, just to see if I could find the place that I wanted to go really sink my teeth into starting a business, which led to starting Immediate. So I know that's like a little abbreviated, a little extended, but it just shows that my mindset from the early 2000s when I was in college was, I'm going to start a business, like,
Yeah.
period. And And even when we had that exit, I didn't go out and buy a flashy new car and do all the things that sometimes people do when they make money. And it wasn't retire money, but it was pay off your house money,
Yeah.
and it was with some left over. And as opposed to me doing that, what I did was I put that money, I set it aside and said, this is the money I'm going to use to start a company one day. And so it was a lot of build up to where we are today to foundationalize and make sure that I was in the best place to succeed.
Yeah. It's funny how serendipity plays into things in your career. I love hearing people's career journeys, but it's also putting yourself out there for the at bats. Like I look back when I first started, I I got my first job. Somebody put out on Facebook, and this was back in the day when Facebook was still the new thing with just in college. And they said, "Hey, our company needs some interns." And I was like, "I don't have a job yet." So that led me
Right.
down this like meandering path to where I am. But it's so random how things work out. But in the end, it makes perfect sense. Love hearing
I'm
those
I
journeys.
I prescribe to the mindset that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.
Mm,
And I think if you take that into everything you're doing, and look, sometimes it's hard to believe that, and sometimes it's hard to get on board, and there may be people that are listening, crap, I'm in a tough spot, I don't feel like this is happening for me.
yeah,
I can look back on some of the darkest days, some of the toughest times, some of the times when I
yeah.
wasn't really sure if this was ever going to work out. And even here, there's been times where I've I've laid awake at night staring at the ceiling fan, just going, "What have I
Hmm.
done?
Yeah,
Is this going to work?" And I think everybody goes through that in some phase of their life. But I think when you can take that as like, "All right, hey, I'm here. What am I going to do about it? And how am I
yeah.
going to use what I've learned and where I am to spring forward? And if I can leverage this, then I'm going to be in a really good spot coming out of
Hmm.
it. And hey, if I'm not, I'm going to take that same mindset. Your mindset can really play with you,
Yeah,
and I just think that there's so much power in being able to shift your thinking. And I know that I can I can sit here and say this because I've been practicing it and doing it for a long time. And my wife and I have this discussion sometimes where she'll be, worried about something, upset about something. I go, just don't think about it. And she'll go, just don't think about it. That's just not an option. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I do think that there's probably some man versus woman in that, where the compartmentalization, guys by and large do a really good job of that, and women have a tougher time to compartmentalize things. But I'm thinking less about compartmentalizing and more about what is me worrying about this going to do to make it better
hmm,
versus me going into action, right?
yeah,
So as opposed to thinking about all the things that are going bad, I think a lot about, like, you got to think about solutions. Think about the solution to the problem, not just fester on the problem. And I think
yeah.
that that's one of the things that just through my career has helped me and guided me to where I am, and still use pretty frequently. So
Yeah, it's what's in the span of your control to a certain extent. And then it's that unlock you mentioned there. Like when you're going through the pain, just realize that's going to be something that's making you stronger. You're going to look back on. I
right,
look back when we went through COVID, it just seemed crazy for like specifically for our company and Hatchworks. But we learned so much through that experience as a company that now when we hit a speed bump or a roadblock, it's like, okay, we've done this before. We've been through this. And it's like building muscle to a
right,
certain extent.
right.
But I want to ask you, get to a philosophical question here. What's your definition of product market fit? And then let's get into kind of the early days of Immediate and how you found that.
Yeah, it's it's to define it is hard, to me at least, because I think every company, every platform, every product are going to have a little bit of different way of looking at it. For us as an organization, I felt like we got to product market fit when we started selling to people that we didn't know.
Yeah.
The first few customers was like, oh, hey, my brother runs a
Yeah,
company and
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got 25 employees. Let's go get them. Oh, hey,
Friends and
I'm,
family
the
stage, right?
exactly. Yeah. That was one of our first customers was the coffee shop that I was working out of because I was working there every day. My wife tells me I'm too
Yeah.
loud and I can't work from home, and so I would go to one coffee shop in the morning. I'd come home, I'd have lunch with her, and then I'd go to another coffee shop in the afternoon. And this one, I got in there one day and they were like, "You're here like every day. What are you doing?" And I was just like, "Hey, sales pitch time." And so I
Mhm.
still knew them, right? There was that. So I felt like when we got over that hump, and I would say probably more so, not even just the one time, because lightning can strike. When we got to a place where we could sell people that we didn't know on a repeatable
Yeah.
way, and that was when it started to click. And it took us post first customer. I'd say it probably took us 7 or 8 months to get to a place where we were really
Yeah.
selling people we didn't know. And that's so that for us at least, that's where I felt product market fit kind of started coming into play, where we felt really, it's like, all right, we've built something that works and that people
Yeah.
will buy and that people will use. So now we're good. Let's see how we can pour gas on the fire and repeat what we've been doing.
Yeah. I like that definition. I've never heard of it told in that way, but it's almost like a test, a litmus test of, okay, are there people outside of my immediate circle interested in buying this? That's a great test. I like that. I've never heard of it referred to in
Yeah,
that
and
way.
then the flip side, if you can't sell your friends and families, you're probably going to have a tough time selling
Yeah.
strangers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Exactly.
so that felt like a pretty good place for us.
Mhm. Cool. So take us down like any kind of early, what was that journey like in the early days to start getting to scale? Any kind of anecdotes or interesting stories along the way?
Yeah, my early sales stories are some of my favorite, just because you've got to be scrappy, right?
Hmm.
You don't have referenceability. We used to laugh, our CTO and I, because people would ask for references early on and they'd say, can we talk to a senior living company that's on ADP that's over 1,000 employees? And I would go, let me see if I can pull together a reference for you. And I'd go back and I'd look at my spreadsheet and I go, we have 7 customers and the largest is 140 employees and none of them are on ADP. And so
Yeah.
I would send an email and I would say, still working on the ADP specific reference, but I found you one that's senior living and I'd like for you to
Yeah.
talk to so and so. And then I would just keep my fingers crossed that would go well enough that they would come back and say, I don't need the ADP specific reference. And
Hmm.
so you do have to do things that are a little scrappy early on. For us, we really made a decision that we were going to focus in healthcare initially, and then also try to focus on quick service and fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
Largely because the solution that we offer, it's a voluntary financial wellness benefit. You mentioned at the beginning, but it essentially allows employees the ability to access their pay in between paydays. So something unexpected
Hmm.
happens, I don't have to turn to run up credit card debt, writing bad check, title, payday loan, et cetera, right? I can go in and say, hey, I've already earned money. I can access a portion of that, and we do it for free to an immediate card or a $3 transaction fee to their own bank issued debit card or bank account. And so all this to say, we looked and said, we believe that primary users of this will be making less than, call it, $30 an hour.
Hmm.
So where are companies with a high volume of people making less than $30 an hour? And that's typically like healthcare as in senior living and like home health, home care,
Yeah.
and physician practices. And then obviously fast food. We see it all the time, right? You'll drive down the road and you'll see a billboard that says, now hiring starting at $16 an hour, $18
Yeah.
an hour. And so we're like, all right, let's go do that. And so I actually had these little cards made. I might have one in my desk here. I do, but it's under a pile of stuff, and I don't want to shuffle around. But I had these little cards made that said had a QR code on the back that went straight to our website, and on the front it said, "You worked today. Why wait to get paid?" And
Oh, there you go. Got the
then on
marketing
the
copy going. I like it.
yep. And this was when I was I was the only marketing guy, and I'm going like, I think this goes well. And so I came up with this tagline that was like our first tagline. It was your pay, your way. And there was a QR code on the back. And so I would hand those out. I would go through the drive-through and I would say, hey, do you mind me asking you a really personal question? And people hear that and they think, what is a really personal question? And I go, sometimes people will be like, I don't think so. But by and large, people go, yeah, no. They're handing me my food. And I go, what? How often do you get paid? And they say, oh. And then they're like the defensive nature goes away because that's not that personal. They didn't ask me how much I get paid. They just said, how often? And so most of them, I get paid every other Friday or every Friday or whatever. And I go, do you have the ability to get paid in between paydays? And most of the time they would say, no, we don't. And I go, wouldn't it be cool if you could access your own money? They go, yeah. And I go, I got a solution for that. And I give them it helped me to tighten up this 20-second elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we got a platform that allows you that connects to your time tracking system and lets you get paid in between paydays for a nominal transaction fee. Would you give that to your boss? And we used that and we kept doing that. We were doing that over and over and over and over again. And then I'd find out if it was a franchise operator or if there's one group. So we're headquartered in Birmingham. There's one group that's headquartered here and they've got 25 locations and all corporate owned. And so I found the CEO's contact info. And so then I'd send them an email. Every time I'd do that, I'd send an email and I go, hey, went to the location over in Wildwood and they said they'd love. This is the 12th time I've had somebody say this, we should get together. Let me share something with you. And so finally he gave me a call and we got on the call and he goes, I've been hearing about this from all the managers at the stores that there's some guy who's dropping cards off in the drive-thru. And so I was like,
persistence.
Well, I'll tell you what, you got to stick with it. And I said, tell you what, give me an opportunity to share this whole presentation with you. And if it doesn't work out, I won't drop off any more cards at your locations. He goes, all right, cool, let's do it. And so they end up becoming a customer. They've got about 1,000 employees. They have 44% enrollment. Our average enrollment is anywhere from 15 to 25. They're at 44% enrollment. And the reason for that is because there's so many people that are in that target market. They're in that pay band where we see a lot of success. And so that was one of the core values of our company is, which at the time we didn't have them. I came up with them as we went and then formalized them. One of our core values is tenacity. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep chipping away. We're going to work hard. And because I believe that in the long run, just being tenacious is what's going to get you over the hump. And so we did that with groups like that fast food chain. We've done some other pretty creative things, but I really, it's funny because when you're in those days, you can't savor it as much as you'd like because you're sitting there going, it's a little bit of kill or be killed. You've got to get some deals done because you've got a finite amount of money. I think at that point we had raised maybe $1 million and a half or something. And we were burning a decent bit of cash. And I'm just out there going, oh, we got to win. All right, you small micro celebration. And then you move on to the next one. And I don't feel like I got to savor that as much in those days, how pivotal those early wins were and still are to the company. And so I think now as you continue to grow and scale and you start putting a team in place, it helps me to remember that, hey, later today, me and one of our sales guys have a meeting with a 9,000 employee company and they sign up. It's going to be a big win. Let's pause and celebrate that.
Wow.
So those are some good learnings along the way.
Yeah. So for the listeners, two key pieces to take away from what Matt just walked through. The first one is focusing on a specific niche in customer base. He mentioned healthcare and then fast food. He had a very specific target versus 15 different targets, spray and pray and not get anywhere. And then second, I love this approach is the bottoms up, user-led growth, starting with the people. Companies like Slack and others, very similar approach. If you just went to the CEO directly and kept pounding on his door, you probably wouldn't have got anywhere. So you almost got this social proof from the bottom. So two really key things to think about and apply to whatever you're doing there. But let's shift now to the AI conversation. So a couple of places we could take this. I'd love to hear how this is either impacting your business or how you're looking to take advantage of it, the first two pieces. And then we'll get into kind of where you think this is going to go into the future as this starts to evolve, because things are evolving rapidly right now.
Right. It's interesting. There's a couple of different ways it's helping us, and I'll focus on two. So one is just the administration and the operational aspect of how our platform works.
Yeah.
And then secondarily is more on like the sales marketing aspect of it. So from an operational perspective, one of the things that we learned early on was that from time to time, people may try to take advantage of a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
For us, the way that we allow people to access money is you clock in and clock out, right? So whatever system
Yeah.
you're using at work, when you clock in and clock out, we look at it, we go, all right, Matt just clocked out. I'm going to use easy math because it's early in the morning. Matt just clocked out a 10-hour shift and he makes $20 an hour. You just earned $200, right?
Yep.
We give you typically up to 50% of that. You can access up to 50% of that. So what we found was we would have people sometimes that would go in and go, you know what, I'm over this job and I'm going to quit on Friday. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to clock in at 6 a.m. and then I'm going to either have my buddy clock me out or I'm going to clock out at like midnight and I'm going to get 18 hours of work. 18 times 20. Now I'm testing myself, $360. And I'm just going to pull out that 180 before they know. And then I got $180. And so we had some, for lack of better terms, some fraud early on.
Yeah.
And we had to figure out how to fix that. When you're small, those, while it hurt, I'd be like, oh, we had to give up $225. Like now we're processing millions and millions of dollars every month. And it's a lot bigger. We got to figure out those things when it's small. And so what we did was our CTO and his team went in and said, what if we started to leverage AI to create a running 60-day average for every employee based off of their employee ID on what their average workday looks like? And then let's create this matrix inside the system that says, if Matt typically works a 6-hour shift and all of a sudden one day he comes in and clocks out a 15-hour shift, that's greater than whatever the delta is, right? I think we'd usually put like a 20 or 25% cap. And so if it's typically a 6-hour shift and you clock out a 15-hour shift, what we would do is we leverage that AI to go, hey, we recognize this is out of the ordinary. We're going to flag that and not give you access to that money until it's either approved by your manager or cleaned up in the system. What we would always default to is, hey, this is well beyond your average workday. We assume this is a mistake. If it's not, can you get your manager to approve it? And so what do? We saw fraud drop. It was like dropped like a lead balloon. It was beautiful. And so we leveraged, and we started doing that 3 years ago. And so we started leveraging AI for operational things like that pretty early on. So now you can fast forward to where we are today, and ChatGPT and everybody's got their, I say everybody, most companies now have some form or aspect of AI that they can leverage. And what we've started really doing is using it in sales, marketing, outreach, et cetera, where it can help you form the outline of what you're trying to do. I'll give you an example. We had a webinar that we just hosted earlier this week, and one of the ladies on our marketing team was on maternity leave. She's back now, but while she was out, she does most of our copy. And I was just like, who's going to do this? This is a big webinar. We're going to big companies. Let's make sure that we've got something that really pops. And so what we did was, by committee, we were like, we're going to go through this thing and tweak it and make it sound really good, but let's start with ChatGPT. And so we just gave it some prompts, right? Like, hey, this is a webinar for earned wage access. Here's the title of it. Here's who's going to be participating. Here's the tone. Here's some of the details we want to get across. And here's the reason that people should join. And in minutes,
Yeah.
seconds. It outputs like a really good framework that we could then go in. So as opposed to us spending an hour, 90 minutes formulating all this, we took the framework and then we tweaked it and adjusted it and made it like really tight and added in some of our own stats and things like that. And in less than 20 minutes, we had a really good invitation outreach email for that. And so those are things that I think the really clear win is to find the way you can use that and associate it. I would assume, and I don't know for a fact, but I would assume that some of our salespeople are probably using something similar when they're doing outreach. Hey, I'm going to outreach to this 30,000 employee fast food chain, and I could sit here and toil for 2 hours over all the right things I'm going to say and not say, and I don't want it to be longer than 6 sentences because people zone out and all those things. And you could drop it in and go, here, now I've got a formula, and I'm going to go in and tweak it. So those are the places that we're really using it today and where we're seeing pretty impactful value from it.
Yeah, and you're doing it the right way. And when we talk to clients, it's identify of your existing processes, where are the most mundane, the most repetitive, or the most painful? It's like those three things. Start there, because it is, with any change, it takes time for people to process and adapt to it. But if you can get a quick win, and that fraud example is amazing, you almost unlock a piece in your team's brain of, wow, this thing actually is pretty powerful, pretty capable. And then they start thinking of other use cases that may be other existing processes, or it may be something wholly new altogether. So that's such a great place to start. And we're doing something similar at Hatchworks. We call it our generative driven development. And the unique thing, like your copy example was great, but what is code? It is a language as well. So it works the same way. So we're building within the framework ways to get to code quicker, testing, regression testing. You can start to apply these same pieces to software development. So we're starting to find a lot of interesting and unique use cases there. So
to that point, one of the things that the way I've thought of AI is like a really bright, really smart intern.
Yeah.
So think about this thing, like Hatchworks goes in this summer, you go, hey, we got this intern from Harvard, and they come in and your CFO goes, hey, we're starting to plan for 2025. Can you put together a pro forma? I'm going to give you our historicals. You put together a pro forma of what you think it's going to look like. I can tell you, Harvard, if it's a Harvard MBA and they're interning, it's going to be a good looking spreadsheet. It's going to have a lot of tabs, and there's going to be some really, but it's not going to be 100% accurate, right? There's going to be some things that, because they haven't been at that company long enough, they haven't been in this field long enough, in the space, whatever it is, there's going to be a gap, and that gap may be 10%, it may be 40%, but the idea that CFO is not going to go, I'm going to let this Harvard intern go build this pro forma that I'm going to slide in front of the board. They're going to go, I'm going to let him do the heavy lifting, and then I'm going to pull it in, and I'm going to go, all right, let me take this, tweak it, and adjust it. And that's the way I think of AI with a lot of these processes like that, like what you just talked about and what I talked about from a sales perspective is, let's allow our team to leverage AI to give us the framework, and then let's take that and then let's make the tone us. Let's add the data points in there. Let's get it the rest of the way. And if we do that, that becomes operating with more efficiency, which means we can touch more people, we can touch more companies, we can get more content out, things of that nature.
Yeah. It's so there's 2 points I completely agree with you on. There's one I disagree with you on there. So I think it's more than an intern. I would almost equate it to, based on the persona you give it, PhD, multiple degrees, whatever.
Yeah, fair
but
point.
The piece I agree with, though, whether it's an intern or somebody highly skilled, if you put them in your organization, they're not going to add a ton of value if they don't have the context. And the third point you mentioned that is critical, and this is where I think some people get stuck, is they'll start with something generic and they get something generic out. The data, whether it's how you're prompting or whether it's, if you're getting more advanced, the data you're leveraging within the GPT or whatever tool you're using, that's where it starts to really unlock some things. It's almost like you're giving it that central brain that's unique to your organization, your situation, whatever it is. But that's where it starts to get really interesting. But if you're not applying that core piece of it, the context, the data, it's cool. It's like a magic trick, but is it
Right.
adding real value? So there's an interesting piece there. So
Yeah.
in the future, last point I'll ask you, where do you think this goes? If you look back to 2022 to where we are now, there's been so much advancement. Where do you see this going, whether it's how it impacts the labor market or just broader economy or smaller use case, anything that kind of sticks out in your head with where this potentially goes?
It's hard for me to put a thought out there about where it goes. But what I can say is that if you're not leveraging it, you're missing out. And I think every
Yeah.
company is going to find ways that you can tighten up processes, you can create more efficiencies. Of course, like when we started leveraging AI for our time tracking validation, like there were
Yeah.
some people here that were, wait, it did that? Like, is my job safe? Are you going
Yeah.
to, now are you
Yeah.
going to take those, like support, for instance? They go, are you going to take our top 10 support tickets and then replace me with that? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer was, no, we're not. But hey, you know what? We are going to, if we do have our top 10 support tickets, and some of ours, our number one support ticket is, I need a new activation code. Our activation codes time out after 30 days. And so if you
Yeah.
don't enroll in the first 30 days and then you decide, whatever, 6 weeks later, you have an unexpected event, that's a really easy one to leverage AI on. And quite frankly, if I'm a support rep, I'm going to go, I don't want to log into the system, click
Mm-hmm.
generate new activation code. And so that's just a mundane task, like you said,
Yeah.
right? And so to me, it's, as it continues to grow and evolve, it's not necessarily that we're going to go in and go, at least for us, right? We're not going to go in and go, all right, well, now we can take our support team of whatever 8 people down to 6 because we've replaced all this. We're going to go, hey, we're going to keep growing. And so now,
Yeah.
as opposed to having to have a new support rep for every 30,000 employees, we can do it for every 50,000 employees. Well, what does that do to the
Mm-hmm.
company? It creates a more profitable business, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
enhances our gross profit margins. And so I think that's the way that, as a business owner, not even a business owner, as a person in the business world, if you can figure out ways that you can leverage AI to create broad efficiencies for what you do in your day in and day out responsibilities, if you can do that, you're going to get ahead. And so I
Yeah.
think that's what's going to happen in the future is you're going to see the companies and individuals who leverage it move forward more quickly, and you're going to see the laggards just starting to fall behind. And so I do think it's here to stay. I do think that there's a ton of value that comes from it, and I think the people that are thinking about, oh gosh, it's going to take over the world, that stuff is so like far off, in my opinion. But what it is, and hey, maybe you're right. But if that happens 30 years from now, let's try to make the most of it for the next 30 years because it's
Yeah.
here and it's not going anywhere. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do feel like that's the best I can give you on that. I'm not smart enough to tell you where I think it's going to go, but I am smart enough to tell you that I think that the people who are leveraging it are going to get ahead.
Yeah, but the most important piece you hit on, and it ties into where we started, right? It's that entrepreneurship piece of it. Just
Right.
start playing around with these tools. I can't stress that enough. So many individuals and even companies are like, oh, we got to figure out our governance. We got to go hire the fancy data scientist person to lead this. It's like, no, just empower your people to start, empower and get them excited about it, to just start using it.
Right.
That's the key piece. And then let just the natural learning start to evolve from there. And one quote I've heard, it was from a friend. He doesn't know where it came from. I got to find out so I can properly attribute it. But he said, AI will change your life whether you embrace it or reject it.
Mhm.
So it's your, which side are you going to be on? Are you
Right.
riding this train in a positive way, or is it impacting you in a negative way? And I think to your point, we'll see how far it goes. But no, really good insight there. But Matt, this has been awesome having you on the Built Right podcast. Where can people find either you or more details about Immediate?
Learn more about Immediate on our website. It's joinimmediate.com. There's tons of content on there, and we've got it broken down for employees and for employers. We are a benefit, so you have to go through your employer if you want to offer this, but joinimmediate.com is a great place to find. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can search me on there. Just throw Matt Pearson Immediate and I'll pop up. And so happy to connect with anybody who listens and wants to follow along on the journey.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.